Good day! So, the 2021 Tokyo Summer Olympics are just around the corner, so I guess we might as well talk about the Smurfs! We did have a pretty fancy Smurfs Olympic special back in the day, so I guess we might as well. So as always, let's take a look back at the special itself, and then we'll yammer on about it after. So, alright, let's Smurf!
Alright, so we start off at a Smurfs picnic, and all the Smurfs are talking about how different Smurfs from the east side of the village are to the Smurfs in the west side of the village. They like different foods, they speak different ways, like for example a sunflower seed. One side calls it a Smurf flower seed, the other side calls it a sunflower Smurf. I'm just as confused either way. Things are getting pretty heated, and I'm getting flashbacks of the 90s rap scene with the East Coast versus the West Coast. But before things escalate too much, Azrael the cat jumps in out of nowhere and starts attacking the Smurfs. But his attacks are unsuccessful. So Hefty's talking to Papa Smurf and he's like, hey man, you know most of the Smurfs are not in really good shape if we're getting any more of these Azrael attacks. Like sooner or later, man, he's gonna nab one of us. I should start a training regiment or something to Smurf them all into shape. But Papa Smurf comes up with the idea of the Smurfic Games. Hey, that's a good way for Smurfs to have fun and to really kind of build up their staminas and whatnot. And so they do. So you got the West Coast Smurfs wearing purple, the East Coast Smurfs wearing orange, and Clumsy is like perfectly in the middle of the village, so no side really wants to claim him. Smurfette feels bad for him. It's like, you know what, me and Clumsy are gonna start a new team, and we're gonna dress in blue because we're original like that. Whoever wins the game wins a medallion, and Brainy Smurf is the judge. But what kind of medallion? Well, let's shift over to some kind of fancy castle. Gargamel's cousin, Argus, he's totally dying, right? And he gets his bird to go to Papa Smurf with this really powerful medallion that he has. The Medallion of Poseidon. And this thing is just bad news. It's totally evil. It's horrible. Don't know why you wouldn't destroy it or something. Anywho, he gets that sent out to Papa Smurf. Argus totally dies, and him and his castle and everything completely disappears like a dying Jedi because Argus didn't want to leave anything behind for Gargamel because, you know, you just cannot trust that guy with all that magic power and stuff that he craves so much. But Gargamel stole the instruction manual for the Medallion of Poseidon before it totally dissipated, and he wants to make it work just out of spite. Also, because he's kind of a jerk. I don't know if you ever noticed that with the guy, but yeah, man, not exactly Mr. German. Papa Smurf gets this medallion, he's like, holy crap, this thing is horrible. So he casts a spell on it to neutralize it as long as it's in the ground, right? And he buries it and then takes off. Brainy, the idiot, sees Papa Smurf do that, and he's like, oh man, that must be the medallion, you know, for the Smurfic Games. Golly gee, I'll dig it up and I'll paint it up and make it look all fancy and stuff. And so he does. Then we get to the Smurfic Games itself. We see a whole bunch of fancy different events. The diving event, the apple shot put, a three-way wrestling match, even some winter games like the ski jump. Where the hell did the snow come from? It's summer there right now. And ice skating? I guess it could have been figure skating, but they were just skating around. So at the end of it, the East has 3 wins, the West has 3 wins, and Clumsy Smurfette have 3 wins as well. We somehow have a 3-way tie. How the hell did Clumsy do that? I guess that must have just been Smurfette doing all the heavy lifting there. So we have a tiebreaker called the Smurfathon. And they're running, right? As this part is happening, Gargamel is using the instruction manual on the Medallion of Poseidon to kick that thing into motion. Because again, he's just a jerk, right? So he had to get a bunch of ingredients, including basically a panty raid on an ogre. He stole Big Mouth's underwear. You know, now that I think about it, how the hell is that an ingredient for like a magic evil spell? Ugh. Okay, I don't want to think about that anymore. Okay, so he gets the ingredients, he sets the spell, and the planet starts destroying itself like Planet Genesis did in Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. Totally horrible. And this is happening during the Smurfathon. So Handy Smurf and Hefty Smurf are basically neck and neck on this race on a cliff when a rock avalanche comes along. Handy's totally in trouble and Hefty stops the race to go back and help him. Clumsy is oblivious to all this, keeps on running, and eventually he wins the race. So he's the Smurfic Smurfic Games winner. Good on him. But the medallion is still going wonky. So Papa Smurf throws it in the ground again, does that chant thingamabobber to neutralize it, and the day is saved. And the spirit of the Smurfic Games come through, where it's all about togetherness, not so much about angry competition. And they're like, yeah, you know what? We're gonna band together and we're gonna rebuild the village. So that was pretty awesome. So Brainy learns the lesson of just let buried medallions stay buried. Gargamel learns the lesson of not destroying the planet. And at the same time, it's like, what was your objective with this, Gargamel? What the hell is wrong with you? Grow up. And Papa Smurf was like, you know what? That was so smurfing hectic. We're gonna do this thing only every 4 years, you know, not every year, that's too much. And then after that, yeah, everything's hip, and that is the end to this wonderful little tale.
Yeah, so that was actually not too bad, right? Like, it's a classic Smurfs episode, really. You got the Smurfs doing their thing, you got Gargamel doing his thing, and the Smurfs win out in the end. You know, your pretty standard Smurf stuff, right? Although for Gargamel, usually he's doing stuff for like a reason, and it's a pretty, you know, obvious reason why he's doing it and how it impacts the Smurfs. This one, he's just being a jerk. He's like, I'm gonna destroy, you know, parts of the world because, you know, my cousin didn't want me to have all this power that, you know, I guess I just proved him right. You know, like, that was kind of off, but the rest of it was, you know, pretty Smurf. And at the end, the whole spirit of the Olympics kind of really shone through. It's not a matter if you win or lose. It's about, you know, the whole coming together as a whole village, or like a global village. And it's all about the spirit of the games, right? So good on them for getting through that while also dealing with a catastrophic event. All in all, this puppy gets 2 Smurfs up from me. And if you haven't seen it before, yeah, check it out, man. Let's see what other stuff we can Smurf out.
Well, alright. Okay, so if we get to the beginning of everything in the story here, well, let's start off with the Olympics. Of course, we all know there was the ancient Greek Olympics. Those ones started off in what we believe was 776 BC, quite some time ago. Of course, the modern Olympics started off in 1896, and the Smurfs actually go back quite a ways too. So in Belgium, we have this artist named Pierre Colliford. He goes by his pen name Peyo, which sounds pretty badass, so good on him. He started this story in the medieval times called Johann and Père Louis, or in English, Johann and Peewit. That started in 1947. Johann was a young aspiring knight, and his sidekick, Père Louis, is like a minstrel, a jester, just a kind of a funny guy. They started getting their comic-styled books in 1947. So if we fast forward a bit to 1958, there was a story of theirs called The Flute with 6 Holes, where Johann and Père Louis had to get this magical flute made from the magical flute makers, and those flute makers turned out to be the Smurfs. So that would be their first appearance. Since then, the Smurfs have become really popular and eventually got their own comic-styled books. Their first comic series album, which was more of an anthology, came out in 1963. It was called The Black Smurfs, which realistically sounds like an all-Smurf cover band of Black Sabbath. But really, that story was essentially like a zombie Smurf apocalypse kind of story. One Smurf got bit, infected another Smurf, bit another Smurf, etc., before they got a cure. So in that anthology book, we had other stories, much like The Smurf Napper, which was the first appearance of Gargamel. He learned about the Smurfs and all that fun stuff and what can be done with them. And the Smurfs were so popular at that point, so of course they even had their own original TV series that was from 1961 to 1967, but it was only really shown in Europe and only in parts of Europe. So in North America, we wouldn't get a Smurf series until 1981 with that classic Smurfs show, which lasted until 1990. Of course, there was a whole bunch of TV specials with the Smurfs too. Eventually, we got the live action version with some CGI in there in 2011. Of course, in 2013, we had the second Smurfs movie. We also had the Smurfs Christmas Carol and the Smurfs Legend of Smurfy Hollow TV specials. And 2017 was a full-out CGI movie, Smurfs The Lost Village. And of course, in 2021, there's talks of a new Smurfs series, all CGI, called Smurfs, A New Touch of Blue. So once that puppy drops, you know, Smurf it out, right? So if we talked about different anthologies of Smurf-type comics, today's featured special was based on 2 of those different anthologies. First one came out in 1972, called Smurf vs. Smurf. Well, I guess also was known as Smurf Green versus Green Smurf. So this story was all about the different usage of Smurf language in the village. The north side of the village spoke one way, the south side of the village spoke a different way. For example, a corkscrew, one side would call it a cork smurf, the other side would call it a smurf screw. Like, what the hell is it? So this one was actually kind of based on like real life in Belgium. Because if you didn't know, in Belgium, there are two languages to that country, French and Dutch. So basically in Belgium, people who live in the north speak more Dutch, whereas in the south they speak more French. So in the special, the Smurfic Games, you had a similar concept, east versus west, and still that different way of speaking, in the same village, which is very Belgian. And of course in the special, that's what kind of led to the games happening in the first place. The second anthology of stories was in 1979 with the Olympic Smurfs. So Hefty Smurf wanted all the Smurfs to get in shape because, it's a good thing to do. Nobody was really interested, so he came up with the concept of the Smurfic Games, and the prize was originally for a medal, just like in the TV special, but none of the Smurfs were really interested in that, so Hefty changed the prize to a kiss from Smurfette. Suddenly, everybody signs up for it. So again, you had the two different Smurf teams, and then you had Weakling Smurf on his own team. Like, man, okay, it's gotta pause for a second. So Papa Smurf names all of these Smurfs, right? Like, and he names a guy Weakling Smurf? Oh man, that just feels like a kick in the teeth, man. Like, is Vanity Smurf vain only for the reason because he was called Vanity Smurf? These are some of the questions that kind of keep me up at night, but I digress. So Weakling Smurf is doing pretty bad. Papa Smurf gives him some fake magic powers, which he puts on his nose, not in or up his nose, but on his nose. Then he suddenly kicks butt and wins the games. Turns out the magic power was just jam, a placebo if you will, and Weakling Smurf found it all inside of him to win. And that was similar in the TV special. It wasn't Weakling Smurf, but it was Clumsy Smurf. So some pretty good adaptations from some classic comic stories.
Right on, and there you go. So thanks for watching the video. I hope you liked it as much as I did making it. Also, feel free to check out the source material that I featured in this video. And if you want to leave a comment on anything you may have liked or things I might have missed in this,